What is up, Steelers Nation? Welcome to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Stephen Thompson, doing for the last time this week my best Noah Strackbine impression. While he gets back from vacation, you get me and my good friend Derek Bell. Derek, how you doing?
What's going on, man? Yeah, let's get this week started off with a bang.
Yeah, we got a fully loaded show for you guys. We got a lot to talk about from some stuff that happened over the weekend. We've got a potential Levi Wallace trade being floated. We've got the Steelers getting some odds on their AFC North chances, and then a really lofty comparison for Jaylen Warren as he enters year two. Let's start with the Levi Wallace rumors. It was Dallas Robinson of Pro Football Network who floated the idea of the Steelers shopping Levi Wallace and potentially trading him to the Detroit Lions. This isn't the first time that we've seen, or I guess it hasn't happened yet, but a Steelers cornerback has already left Pittsburgh and gone to Detroit. Cam Sutton left this offseason. I saw this rumor of another Steelers corner, Levi Wallace, going over to the Lions, and it was interesting. It's something to think about, but what do you make of this rumor, and do you think it really has any legs, and the Steelers would even consider trading away a guy like Wallace to the Lions?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that people are seeing, Joey Porter Jr. kind of waiting in the wings and kind of just assuming that Wallace is going to be the, kind of odd man out. But I think for me, my initial reaction is there's no way that I would do it right now. But my opinion could change maybe after training camp, after the preseason, depending on the readiness of the rookie corners. And it's funny that you sent me the topics for the pod, and I had just written a short article about Levi Wallace. And, Wallace's background is really wild. I mean, he has one of the craziest roads to the NFL of any cornerback that I can remember. He was a 0-star recruit out of high school. He walked on at Alabama, then somehow earned a scholarship and then earned a starting job at Alabama, goes undrafted, starts almost immediately, a heavy contributor for the Bills defense, and then, earns himself a nice second contract with the Steelers. So he's always been a guy that's kind of been counted out. And, I think that, it's kind of fitting that people are already kind of throwing him to the side, I guess, in favor of, the younger guys.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because I think the Steelers look at all the corners that they have as kind of a monolith, and everyone kind of plays the same position, and they don't really worry about fit as much as maybe they should. But I feel like in another vein, we've talked a lot about the difference between what the Steelers have on the outside and what the Steelers have at slot corner. Like they're just different options. And
Mhm.
if Patrick Peterson is going to play as much in the slot and kind of play in more of those zone fits uh, that the Steelers bring him out in, and they got to kind of make it work for Patrick Peterson, which means he's not a surefire. We'll just throw him on the outside. He's plug and play immediately. Like they're gonna have to adjust a little bit. Wallace, on the other hand, I felt I wasn't the biggest Levi Wallace fan last year, but he was. You look at the numbers, and he was really really solid for them in a reserve role. Like while this team battled a ton of injuries, especially at his position, he was second on the team and second among corners and tackles, second among corners in pass deflections, interceptions. He was really, really good for them. And so if you're going to have to move Patrick Peterson around, if you have to make these other corners work in terms of, moving them from the slot or the outside or something like that, Wallace gives you a great second option right behind Patrick Peterson to play the outside. You know what you're getting, and you know that it's pretty reliable. I don't really buy the idea of, especially when you're going to rely on. It seems like you're going to rely pretty heavily on a rookie. Why you would trade your only real insurance plan against Joey Porter maybe not being what everyone expects? That seems a little that would seem a little irresponsible to me if that did happen.
Yeah, I think the timing of everything too, like, really matters in this case, right? I mean, like I said, I don't think that I would be a fan of making that trade right now.
Yeah,
Now, training camp comes around and preseason comes around, and the young bucks, Porter Jr. and Trice look the part, then potentially I could get on board with maybe exploring what the market could be for him. But I just think with Wallace, man, like, what you're going to get from him. You mentioned, 6 PBUs last year, 4 interceptions. He cut down on the penalties. He had 9 in his final season with the Bills, even though that was by far the best year of his career to date. He only had 2 penalties last year. I highlighted some of the things over the course of the season where I felt like there were times where he was the beneficiary of some poor quarterback play, maybe got away with some gambles that didn't show up on the stat sheet. But I still think that Wallace gives you that CB2 baseline, CB3 type of player. And you need those guys, right? I mean, every NFL team's looking for depth at cornerback spot. With how loaded the receiver position is around the NFL right now, you can never have enough guys to cover those weapons, right? And I think that, like you mentioned with Porter Jr. and Trice, relying on rookies, especially at that position, is always a little bit scary, right? You think about some of the positions that are harder to make that transition from the NCAA to the NFL. You think about quarterback, corner, tight end. Those are the three positions where I feel like it takes a really long time to kind of get up to speed. And I just think that if you're relying on rookies to come in and play day one, you're putting yourself kind of in a difficult situation potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a good point about. I think this hinges a little bit on not just Porter, but like Corey Trice too.
Definitely.
Like the depth behind him is really important. If those guys are not ready to take on even a backup role yet, then yeah, you cannot get rid of Levi Wallace. And especially like, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
And I think you make a good point with Trice because here's the deal: Porter's going to play
Yeah,
regardless. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Oh yeah,
Porter's going to work his way in. I don't think it's even a stretch to say that Porter isn't necessarily even a starter week one because I would think that the passing nickel personnel is probably going to be Wallace on the outside, Peterson in the slot, and then Porter Jr. on the outside on the other side. I mean, I think that that's probably a likelihood week one.
mm,
So really, when you're talking about trading a guy like Levi Wallace, it would really be contingent on being confident in Corey Trice as a depth option. I think the Steelers know what they have in James Pierre fighting for a spot and Patrick Peterson. We'll see what his usage is throughout the summer, but I do agree. It really just depends on how comfortable are they with Trice coming in a pinch if a guy goes down to an injury. Different circumstances like that kind of potentially arise.
absolutely. And I also want to ask you, what? So you said that this is not a trade you'd make now, but maybe something you'd look at in the future if the situation is right. What would it take for you to get rid of if you're Omar Khan? What would it take for you to get rid of Levi Wallace? Because in this uh in this write up from Robinson, he suggested a day 3 pick, which I felt like was wildly underrating how valuable Levi
hmm
Wallace is.
Well, he's on an expiring contract, right? And
Mm,
the Steelers aren't really going to benefit a ton from a trade from a cap perspective. And the Steelers have cap flexibility too. They still have the potential
mm,
to restructure TJ Watt's deal. It's not like they are hurting for cap space. You know what I'm saying? And that aspect of it does it for me. In terms of a day 3 pick, I think a fifth rounder or something is potentially what Wallace would go for. It just depends on how desperate somebody is. You know what I'm saying? How well
yeah,
they think he fits their system. But it, the Steelers are trying to win this year, right? Like I think that you look at 2021 as a transition year. Last year was a rebuilding year. I think this year with the moves that they've made, they've made moves for veteran pieces such as Patrick Peterson, such as Allen Robinson. I think the Steelers are trying to win this year. So what helps you win more this year, Levi Wallace or a fifth round pick next year? I think that that's an easy conversation
right,
to be had, right? So to me, I think that it would have to be a situation where Joey Porter Jr. and Corey Trice just look absolutely phenomenal in
yeah,
preseason throughout the summer to where you are 100% kind of they almost make you make that decision where you're just sitting there saying, I can't keep these guys off the field. If you get to that point, because I think it's obvious that Porter has more of a ceiling than Wallace does. Wallace has some
mhm.
athletic limitations. He's 28 years old. You know what he is at this point. But if those other two youngsters come in and they just force the Steelers' hand to play them right away, maybe you explore that. I would be a little bit surprised if we got to that situation though.
Yeah, I would too. And I think that's a perfect way to think about it is if you want to win now, a day 3 pick, a round 5 pick, even like a round 4, like that doesn't help you. And you're looking for guys who can contribute now, not another, rookie project, especially at this position where they just get younger by the year.
And on the flip side of that too, the comp pick situation, right? If Wallace goes out there, he is a starter and he maintains that job for the rest of the season. If he plays like he did last year, there's nothing preventing him from getting a similar contract to what he's on from the Steelers, maybe a little bit of a raise. I mean, you look at what Cam Sutton just got from Detroit. I think Sutton's a better player, certainly a more versatile one, but I think that Wallace could play himself into a raise next year on the free agency market, and then
Mhm.
that, potentially could add a comp pick to the Steelers the following season. So it's not as if there's no upside to keeping him. You know what I'm saying? And what I talk about with Porter Jr., especially with him being able to play right away, there's some technical stuff that he really needs to work on in terms of his footwork and press coverage. And that's something that I'm going to be watching a ton when we get to Latrobe and get to watch training camp, when we get to the preseason. How does he look against these bigger, better athletes, guys that, some of the things that he got away with on talent alone and length in college, NFL receivers are going to make him pay for some of those tiny mistakes with his footwork,
Mhm.
with his hand placement and jams. So I'm excited to see what he's been able to clean up and improve on over these past couple months working with the Steelers coaches. So I'm holding off on a trade on Levi Wallace.
Yeah.
I know everybody's excited about the rookies, and I am too, man. I'm so excited to see those guys play. It's just I think we're putting the cart, kind of ahead of the horse, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it matters also not just how much Joey Porter and Corey Trice improve, but how quickly they do it too. Because, like you said, the timing is
Hmm.
important too. So definitely read Derek's right about Levi Wallace if you're interested in this further. Something to pay attention to. Something we'll definitely be paying attention to as we get to Latrobe and get to training camp. Moving on a little bit, moving on towards the past training camp, towards the actual season. The Steelers got some odds released this weekend from BetOnline AG. The Steelers most likely to finish last in the AFC North, according to BetOnline AG. Let me pull up the actual numbers here. So, of course, the Bengals are the favorite to win the division. They're at plus 120. But the Steelers have the worst odds to win the division, and they are most likely to finish last. They're plus 500 for a first place finish. They have the best odds of anyone to finish last at plus 175. If what BetOnline AG has up right now holds correct, the Steelers will finish last behind the Browns. The Ravens will be second, and the Bengals first. Steelers haven't finished last in the AFC North since 1999. Are these fair odds for the Steelers? Do you think this is accurate? Do you think this is deserved given all the moves they made this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, the AFC North is going to be super competitive, right? I think that's one of the most exciting things about, the fall is going to be watching these four teams just absolutely try to kill each other. But man, I think they are correct and the Bengals are the favorites.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion, until somebody knocks the Bengals off and, they've won the division the past couple seasons, I don't see any reason why you should pick anybody else, I guess, to win the division beyond just fan fan kind of thinking.
Mhm.
But Baltimore and the Steelers, I think that there's a conversation to be had there in terms of which roster you'd rather have. I think that the big thing with that conversation starts for me with, is Lamar Jackson going to be healthy? I'm actually really looking forward to seeing Lamar with Todd Monken's offense because I've been a big fan of him, watching him with the Georgia offense. When I was doing my studies on Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington, Monken's offense is really creative. I think Lamar is a good fit for that. But is Lamar going to be healthy? He hasn't finished the season the past 2 years. Baltimore wins 70% of their games when he's at quarterback. That's great. But if he's going to miss 6, 7 games, it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying? Baltimore, he's only been healthy for what, two Steelers games or something like that. So when you're comparing the two teams, I got to know, is Lamar going to be playing? Is he going to be healthy? If he's not, then I think the Steelers have a good chance to be a better team than Baltimore, too. And then the Browns, man. I like what the Browns have done roster wise, and I think they made some good moves. They addressed, the front seven on the defensive side of the ball. I think they got a little bit tougher against the run, but it's going to depend on Deshaun Watson. I mean, I
Yeah.
was not impressed. I'm sure like mostly everyone feels the same way. I was not impressed with what I saw from Watson last season. He was horrific in every sense of the word, and his contract's about to get really expensive next year. So until Watson looks like the player from 2020 or whenever the last time he was really an elite player, I can't really get fully on board with Cleveland as a better team than the Steelers, especially when, we saw what that matchup looked like, in the regular season finale last season.
Right. And so like yeah, like there's a conversation to be had about Baltimore. Like I don't think there's any clear cut like if you had to assign a favorite for that second spot, I agree with you. Cincinnati until they get knocked off, they're the number one. Uh Baltimore is probably your number two, at least on paper, but I think the Steelers are definitely in that conversation as well. The love for the Browns over the Steelers confuses me so much. I don't understand it at all. I don't think this franchise has done anything to earn the benefit of the doubt in that sense. But even beyond that, like yeah, Deshaun Watson looked bad, and I get that he had to sit out for so many games, and there was maybe some chemistry like that team had to build with each other. But even by like you said, the last game of the regular season, Deshaun Watson was not impressive with any of those guys in any sense. Like, and I don't know, I feel like the Steelers only had room to grow. Like, I don't expect the Steelers to regress at all. The defense is probably going to be just as good. The offense should, in every sense, be better. They upgraded their talent. They have more, year two with Kenny Pickett and George Pickens and adding Calvin Austin to the mix. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's. I can't really think of a reason why the Browns would be such decided favorites over the Steelers to be better this season. I just don't see it at all.
One more time. So I'm not a betting guy, but can you run me down what's the difference in the Steelers' odds to finish first and the Browns' odds to finish first?
So the Browns. I don't have that written down here, but the Steelers are plus 500 to finish first. Let me pull them
Okay.
up real.
Okay.
Um, and I believe the Browns have the third best odds, but it's maybe plus 400 as opposed to I'm pulling it up. Like it's a pretty
Pretty sizable
yeah, it's
difference, I guess.
yeah, it's pretty healthy. Yeah, the Browns are plus 400 to finish first, plus 300 to finish second, plus
Okay.
20 plus 225 to finish third.
I
And
don't
then
know,
plus
man. I just think again, I think quarterback discussion is going to be the driving point of this argument. I don't think you can really argue that Joe Burrow, has ascended himself into one of the better quarterbacks in the AFC. Lamar Jackson's done his thing over the course of his career, but like I said, I think that you've got to start taking his health into consideration when you're having some of these discussions. I think Lamar's a very, very good player. He's fun to watch. The Ravens are really good when he's behind center, but again, he hasn't finished the last two seasons. So until I think that you have to at least be a little bit wary of that when you're talking about this. Watson, man, he was just so bad last season and missing on easy throws, making poor decisions. He just didn't look anything like the quarterback that we last saw when he was in Houston. And Kenny Pickett, this is obviously a big year for him. We need to see a good amount of development, a good amount of growth from him in year two. As now that he's the starter entering the season, I think that the Steelers, we talked about this throughout the draft process and free agency, but I think the Steelers have done an excellent job providing a good infrastructure for a young quarterback. They've addressed the offensive line. I think the offensive line is now at least a average to solid unit. And I think that that's a big step up from where it's been in years past. I think when you look at the weaponry, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth is a really nice 1, 2, 3. Allen Robinson potentially having a breakout or a bounce back season, after he wasn't healthy last year with LA. So it's going to be interesting to see, man. But I think Pickett, if he takes the year two leap that I think that most Steeler fans are expecting him to take, I just don't see a scenario where I wouldn't be comfortable at least betting on the Steelers to finish ahead of Cleveland and right there with Baltimore, depending on what happens with Jackson's health. So
yeah, right. Then that's the thing. These are if you're betting through Bet Online, these are position of finish, like exact finish in the division, and the Steelers don't need to. So the Steelers don't need to win the division to win you some money. Like if you bet on them to place third or even second, like that's a pretty good value right there. Especially like, compared to the rest of the league. Like
especially like you said, they haven't finished last since 1999. I mean,
right,
I
you
feel
can
like
bet on history here. Like
yeah.
history is in your favor if you want to bet on the Steelers this year. Yeah, I agree. Bengals are the favorite. They've earned that. Ravens probably next, but you got to take in. I also don't think the Ravens have really upgraded their receiver room in a meaningful way. That's also kind of I'll believe it when I see it. Zay Flowers I think is good, but OBJ like coming off an Achilles injury, he's on the wrong side of 30. Like I'm
It's
not
gonna be
super sold.
interesting to see for sure. I think one of my things with Baltimore that I want to see personally is I think they've got some really, really good players on defense. Kyle Hamilton has had an awesome rookie season. Bringing over Roquan Smith kind of was able to unlock and I feel like light a spark under Patrick Queen, who was relatively disappointing up until that trade. They've got some decent players, still got Marlon Humphrey, but I think their secondary, their cornerback room is a little bit
Mm,
thin. I think that if you look at the depth chart, after Marlon Humphrey, it's a little bit sketchy. I think they're relying on some development, bounce back seasons from some guys, and then I think about the one thing that really scares me about them, even fully healthy, is the pass rush going to be good enough? I mean,
yeah,
if you just look at some of the edge rushers that they've got, always been a guy that has always been more flash or athleticism over actual production. David Ajabo, who I really, really liked in the draft process, was still working his way back from that really bad injury from his pro day. How does he look another year removed from that injury? You know, the Ravens need pass rushing, and that they're a team to watch in terms of when we talk about once the preseason gets underway and training camp gets underway, they're a team to watch in terms of potentially going out and making a move for an impact pass rusher, or if a veteran gets released unexpectedly or something like that. But pass rushing is another thing that I would be a little bit cautious about, hyping the Ravens up a little bit too much.
absolutely. There's a lot of potential in this division on kind of around the board, and it doesn't seem like there's a
It's gonna be fun.
right outside of the Bengals. Like there's not a very sure thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the field. Moving on a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about what might play out in the field this year. We've got a lofty comparison coming for Jaylen Warren. But first, we got a word from our boys over at Manscaped. Summer's coming. Are you ready to unveil your beach bod? Manscaped is here to ensure your body's ready for the wild with their game changing full body grooming and hygiene products. Don't be the guy at the beach with Austin Powers' chest hair, and if you grew some winter man tits, the least you can do is make sure they're hairless. It's time to get ready for hot guy summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code STEELERS20. Manscaped is dedicated to helping you increase your confidence and level up your full body grooming game with the Performance Package 4.0. The kit comes with the essential Lawnmower 4.0 waterproof cordless body trimmer and a ton of other liquid formulations that your grooming routine. Whether you're trimming your chest or the treasure chest in your pants, this is the best trimmer on the market. Their trimmer features a ceramic blade designed to cut hair on loose skin and to reduce grooming accidents thanks to the advanced skin safe technology. You can even trim an arrow pointing to the promised land if you're bold enough. Inside the performance package, you'll also find the Manscaped Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner, an anti chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer because we know how painful chafing can be when you're wearing your bathing suit all day. No one likes nose hair, so their package also comes with the Weed Whacker 2.0. You also get two free gifts, the Shed Travel Bag and the patented high performance reduced chafing Manscaped Boxers. If you're wearing sandals, you'll also need to get the Manscaped Shears 2.0 Nail Kit. Having the right tools for grooming is essential, so do yourself a favor and always use the right tools for the job. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code Steelers20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code Steelers20 at manscaped.com. Trim your chesticles with the besticles. I'm glad that is the hopefully the last time for a while. I will have to read one of those, but
You're getting so good at 'em,
I
man.
know.
Noah might be making you do those when he gets back.
I know I am finding the groove a little bit. That's a double edged sword you deal with. But let's get to Jaylen Warren. Let's talk a little bit about him and what we expect from the Steelers RB2 coming into year two. At least one person, at least one NFL reporter expects a lot from Jaylen Warren heading into year two. He had a good year last year in a backup role, kind of came out of nowhere, coming out of training camp. But Sports Illustrated's Connor Orr wrote over the weekend about what he sees in Jaylen Warren, and I'll read you this full quote because they're pretty lofty expectations. So here he is. Open the quote. Over 77 carries last year, Warren flashed a bit of young Austin Eckler. He's an excellent receiver out of the backfield, nabbing 28 of his 33 catch opportunities. And while Harris was clearly the better pass protector, there is a value in having a second dual threat option out of the backfield who, at 5'8", provides a drastically different sightline for defenders. Pittsburgh's backfield is almost like facing a baseball team that is allowed to change pitchers on a batter-to-batter basis. So I just want to get your thoughts. What do you think of this comparison to Austin Eckler for Jaylen Warren? It's obviously some big shoes to fit into and a lot to live up to, but I don't know if I necessarily hate it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's certainly lofty. I mean, Eckler's been a very good player for quite some time now. He's been trying to get a new contract. It seemed like, his time in LA might be headed to a little bit of an end after this year, but he's been a good player. Another guy, I believe Eckler was undrafted as well, similar to Warren, kind of a
Mhm.
similar story. They're both smaller backs. I think Eckler is around 5'9", 5'10",
Yep.
200. Warren, I think they list him around 5'8", 210 or something like that. So
Mhm.
very similar builds for those two running backs. Also, one of the things I kind of think is interesting that maybe might have led to this comparison is, Eckler, when he was kind of coming into the league, he forced himself onto the field. And even though the Chargers had Melvin Gordon, top pick, he was a first rounder. I think Gordon was a first rounder, but he was kind of viewed as the workhorse or bell cow of that Chargers offense for a while. The knock on Gordon was that he wasn't extremely efficient. And I think right now the knock on Najee Harris is, he's not efficient. Similar to what Gordon's numbers look like throughout his time with the Chargers. Harris been under 4 yards a carry with the Steelers. Now, some of that obviously is beyond his control. He's been running behind some
Mhm.
offensive lines that haven't been the greatest in the system that, I think that we can all agree isn't the most imaginative in the world. But, Warren has been impressive, man. And I think the Eckler comparisons are very lofty, and I don't see that being the case here. But I think that just in general, Steeler fans and everyone alike should be really appreciative of the efforts that they got from Warren last year and excited about his potential moving forward, especially when he literally costed you nothing to acquire. So I'm really excited about that in general.
Right. And I think, you can get lost in this comparison, but Jaylen Warren doesn't have to be Austin Eckler to be a real valuable piece.
Absolutely.
He doesn't have to lead the league in touchdowns and he definitely won't, at least while Najee Harris is still wearing black and gold. But man, like what a luxury to have a guy who can kind of change your pace a little bit, but also bring you some power in the same way that Najee does. And I just think running the football is going to be so important. Like it's still, even with, year two Kenny Pickett, year two from George Pickens, Allen Robinson, and Calvin Austin in the mix now. Running the football is still going to be really important for this team, and it's going to be a large indicator of how successful they are. And so to not have to miss a beat at all, or you would expect them not to miss a beat, even if Najee Harris has to come off the field, you have to feel really good about that. And Jaylen has given them such a boost out of nowhere. Like it's a little unbelievable now that we weren't more concerned about kind of the running back two situation. I felt like going into training camp last year, like Benny Snell was fine. I felt like he proved in that Indianapolis game he's a capable player. But man, they were thin at running back when you kind of look back at it
Hmm.
going into training camp last year. And Najee, given all the hits that he took, it's pretty shocking that he didn't miss more time. Obviously, there were those Frank injuries at the beginning of the year that clearly slowed him down a little bit. But man, yeah, Jaylen Warren was just a complete luxury. And when I felt like we were just waiting all year for him to finally like break through and get his opportunity, and for the team to really trust him like that. I'm excited to see what his role is like this year. Because I think Najee's set up for a year where he takes 70% of the snaps. But like you said, Jaylen Warren forced himself onto the field, and it's something that they can't really ignore going into
Yeah.
year two.
It's kind of like what we talked about with Porter Jr. and Trice earlier, about young guys just being so good and basically forcing the Steelers coaching staff's hand and saying, "Hey, you got to put me on the field. I'm too
Mhm.
impactful. You can't leave me on the bench." And that's essentially what Warren did. He passed up Anthony McFarland, he passed up Benny Snell, and worked himself into a nice role last season. I mean, two of my favorite stats that I was looking up before we got on here. Jaylen Warren. averaged 3.08 yards after contact last season. That was right in between Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. So those are
Pretty good.
pretty good names to be in the same hemisphere on. That those are his rushing numbers, albeit in a smaller sample size. And then if you look at his receptions, I think he had 28 catches, 14 of those went for first downs. So
Mm.
I think that, like you said, there's value in that. And I think that it's interesting because at times I thought on social media, people were kind of pinning they were pinning Najee Harris against Jaylen Warren and vice versa. But I really think that it needs to be a group effort and understand that this can work out for both parties. Najee only working 65% of the snaps is a good thing for his long-term health. It's a way to keep him fresh. It's a way to keep him healthy. And then Jaylen Warren playing 35%, he can come in when he's really fresh and give you a little bit of a spark off the bench. It doesn't have to be necessarily one or the other. And I think that when you look at Najee, some of those hits that he's taken, he's had a lot of touches, man, over the course of his football shelf life. He was a bell cow at Alabama, took a lot of touches there, took a lot of touches his first 2 years with the Steelers. So if you want to get him to this, fifth year option, these next 3 years, if you want to get through these seasons relatively healthy and productive, I think that you need somebody that can come in and take a little bit of the load off of him. And I think that Jaylen Warren proved last year that he could potentially do that for the long term.
Right, and it's not even like I think they lose a whole lot. Like, I think Najee's the better player, but they don't really lose a whole lot. And I think in that same vein, you can think even more immediately about, okay, if this team is going to win in the way and take the steps forward that people expect them to, 17 games is a long season, 18 weeks is a long season, and if you want to go even further than that, having a solid backup and a capable backup, you know, in case of emergency if Najee gets hurt, but also just like through the week to week routine of we just want to lighten his load by a little bit. Take some of these carries that he might have taken during the regular season. Let's just put him in week 19 in the playoffs and week 20 and week 21. That's awesome to have. And like I said, he doesn't need to be Austin Eckler
Yeah.
to be really valuable and to give this team a huge boost that it could really use to take the strides on offense that people expect them to.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the playoffs too. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? We talked about, 21 being a transition year, 22 being a little bit of a rebuild year. This year, the Steelers are aiming for that postseason. That should be the expectation in terms of where they are in the process. So I think with Jaylen Warren, the ability to keep Najee fresh and capable going into the playoffs. And I really think about where he was in 2021 when the Steelers ended up narrowly making it to the playoffs against the Chiefs. Man, if you just look at Najee down the stretch of that season, he was gassed. I mean, they had
Yeah.
put so much on his plate, not just in the run game, but he was heavily involved in the passing game, even more so than last season. So I just think that the having the ability to not run him into the ground while he can still be, the feature guy. This doesn't necessarily need to be a 50-50 timeshare, but the ability to keep him fresh, I think is very attractive. And the Steelers are going to be a run heavy team this year. That's their MO. That's how they want to play. So having two capable running backs that are going to be able to keep you ahead of the chains and in control of the game, I think is really valuable.
Absolutely. So we're excited to see what Jaylen Warren has in store for year two. With that, we're gonna get out of here. This is we're hoping to have Noah back. We're expecting to have Noah back on Wednesday, and Derek will be back on Friday. I'll be with Noah on Wednesday. But thank you all for tuning in to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, like this video, follow our work on allsteelers.com, and we will see you all next week. Peace.